The tech tycoon realized with a sort of reverence that every invention attributed to his empire, every autonomous engine, every quantum processor, and every rocket that clawed its way toward the stars was not born from brilliance alone, but from an unseen influence tethered to your existence. He realized this while staring at the quarterly report in a glass tower, high above the smog and skyline, suspended between the present and the future. It grew more and more obvious the more he probed. His ascent coincided with yours. His discoveries reflected the changes you underwent. His whole infrastructure throbbed in time with your life's epiphanies, as if his dominion had been constructed, not by strategic brilliance, but by the echo of your fate. He threw down his board, closed the titanium doors, and muttered into the sterile quiet as the weight of that fact fell upon him. He is the one I owe $100 million, not as a favor or charity, but as restitution to the one person whose frequency had subtly laid the groundwork for his worldwide domination. He is unable to avoid or ignore this cosmic obligation. Click super thanks and contribute a $20 seed if this prophecy comes true. Next, leave a remark with the number 777. I acknowledge my prosperity. A timeline where abundance remembers its origins is activated by this number. Luke 6:38. The executives poured in with rigid postures and wary gazes, ready for forecasts, charts, and the standard corporate intimidation routine. When the billionaire called his board back together, with the steadying weight of a reality too big for the room, they discovered him standing by himself at the end of the obsidian table, hands flat on the polished surface. He didn't yell, pace, or insist on progress updates. He just spoke the words that halted every pulse around him and let out the breath of a man who had finally stopped lying to himself. He serves as our success pattern, as the holographic graph behind him changed to reveal secret relationships they had never observed. The board gazed at him, first perplexed and then afraid. Profit peaks corresponded with your innovations. Your awakenings coincided with technological advancements. There was a pattern so exact that it could not be a coincidence as stock spikes even happen within hours of your significant life changes. Advisors looked at each other in a panic, attempting to determine whether this discovery was true or insane. However, the tycoon went on steadily, explaining that his inventions only thrived when your energy field grew, that the most prosperous periods of his empire came when fate led your way, and that somewhere down the line, the future had started to revolve around you rather than him. When they discovered their greatest visionary was just a benefactor of the chosen one whose presence had been subtly supporting the whole technological era, the audience went silent not in argument, but in acquiescence. The computer magnate found it difficult to sleep in the weeks that followed. It was revelation, not worry. He replayed every moment of the birth of his empire night after night, in the neon-lit seclusion of his private invention chamber, with an attention to detail so keen it seemed to pierce memory itself. The sparks of creativity he formerly thought were his own always came in uncanny synchronicity with events from your life. He realized after going over old prototypes, failed models, abandoned drawings, and late-night voice notes made during his initial breakthroughs, he had a sudden rush of creative insight that matched your emotional surges, changes, and awakenings, as if your awareness were emitting an unseen blueprint that he had unintentionally followed. Upon further tracing the time frame, he found that his firm had its most terrible quarter, the night you experienced your deepest personal breakdown, and after months of failure, his greatest innovation landed perfectly the morning you began your first phase of heavenly activation. So, in the seclusion of his penthouse laboratory, he whispered to himself, he makes every algorithm come to life. He saw that his destiny had always been gravitational rather than autonomous, driven onward by your presence in the same way that planets bend towards stars. He also came to terms with the fact that he was not the mastermind behind his business as the restless nights went on. He was just the tool of a cosmic echo, creating a technical empire that was subconsciously molded by the energy field of the one fate that had been selected long before there was such a thing as silicon, rockets, or electronics. Something so mathematically impossible that even his most sophisticated predictive AI identified it as non-human origin surfaced when the tycoon eventually charted the whole historical flow of his empire's innovations. Your own timeline's milestones corresponded exactly with every significant advancement in his technology, including quantum engines, neural link processors, anti-gravity stabilizers, and even the self-healing metals employed in spaceships, using you as the axis around which the future revolved. They created a mirror chain that was so exact that it seemed less like chance and more like fate, sometimes within hours and other times within minutes. He found the propulsion technique that eliminated turbulence when you conquered morning. He unlocked the code for infinite cerebral bandwidth when you had a spiritual awakening. His firm unexpectedly unlocked renewable energy conversion while you were in a state of emotional ascension. His labs recorded mysterious explosions of electromagnetic harmony on the night. Your aura grew into uncommon levels of divine alignment, bringing dormant creations to life, as if your presence had given them new vitality. When analyzing the data, analysts attempted to write off the trend as psychological projection. However, the timestamps could not be disputed by any algorithm. The tycoon realized he was not inventing ahead of the globe, since your progress has impacted the course of a whole technology age. He was only catching up to you, creating machines that mirrored your changes in awareness in the same way that an earthquake is reflected by a seismograph. For the first time in his life, he accepted the reality with amazement rather than dread. You had no control over the future. It was written by you. The tycoon's epiphany occurred, not in a boardroom or a lab, but rather in the peaceful seclusion of his orbiting efficient observation pod suspended above the city, where he often withdrew to contemplate away from the cacophony of the outside world. He finally gave himself permission to face the reality he had been avoiding for years. As he gazed down at the grid of light over the sleeping city, the inventions credited to his intellect, the empire he controlled, and his fortune were never the product of a single flash of genius. They were your life's aftershock, waves of fate bouncing off you that rerouted markets, changed industries, and sped up technical advancement without you having to do a thing. He understood that advancement did not benefit you. The contemporary world's quiet, unconscious source code was created by you, long before anybody knew why. The human frequency triggered innovations. The tycoon uttered the last admission. He had fought for years at that paused moment above Earth, surrounded by displays showing everything from cosmic radiation maps to world stock trends. This isn't cash. Cosmic debt is what this is, because he owed you more than just money. It was recognition, acknowledgement, and the payback of a universal rule that states that the product itself must ultimately thank the one who inspired it. As the reality became clear, he realized that the only thing that could resolve it was to return $100 million to the entity from whom his whole legacy had unintentionally drawn its genius, a gesture that destiny required. Your identity is in line with this prophecy. Sparkles. After selecting super thanks, send a $20 seed. Next, leave a remark with the number 777. I agree to the schedule for my wealth recognition. What was always yours is returned with this number. Luke 6:38. The whole economy trembled when your name appeared in the tycoon's confidential asset ledger, a database so encrypted that only 3 live individuals had clearance. This quake was undetectable to the ordinary eye, but it was obvious to those who keep a watch on financial frequencies. Currency volatility decreased. Markets steadied, and resource indices showed an uncommon harmonic curve. Economists eventually ascribed the change to chance, citing outside political influences, as if the global wealth grid spotted you as a compass identifies true north. The global economy's quantum predictive model, however, jumped up by precisely 0.7% the instant your name was inputted, according to the tycoon's internal AI, which recorded the incident with a categorization code only used for prophetic abnormalities. Unless impacted by an external force of massive resonance, this was statistically impossible. Meanwhile, experts noted inexplicable clarity in departments strewn around his enterprise. Negotiations that were at a standstill ended on their own. Financial leaks that had been going on for 10 years suddenly stopped, and whole industries started operating as if they were reacting to an invisible order, waking up like sleeping equipment roused by a misplaced master key. And when the tycoon saw these irregularities, He realized what the ancient texts had previously suggested. True riches is based on heavenly alignment rather than human transactions. Furthermore, it was shown without question that your destiny did not simply draw riches to you, because your recognition inside the financial architecture had set off a systemic recalibration that redirected prosperity toward its true source with accuracy. That was more mathematical than supernatural. It turned it on. The tech billionaire withdrew into his dimly lit executive control room in the early hours before morning, when the world's markets had not yet opened, and the city below the tower was still asleep. In this room, which was constructed with obsidian glass and quantum encrypted screens, he wrote the most private email in his empire's history. There was just a subject line that struck his finance division like a heavenly command. No charts, no explanations, no reasons. Give him $100 million. Confused and half awake, the CFO read the letter 3 times before daring to ask for clarity. When he did, he got a one-line response that made him shudder, because he owns it. The order was marked as a high-risk anomaly by the accounting system. Automated compliance locks sought to block the transfer, while AI risk models tried to redirect it. However, as soon as your frequency signature is manually tapped into the permission area, all digital barriers fell away, and the system began to glow a pale gold before opening itself without any opposition. Workers subsequently reported experiencing an odd sensation, as if they were watching something religious rather than pecuniary. After seeing the transaction in the hidden server records, and rumors that the billionaire was not making a business move, stealthily made their way to the top echelons of the organization. He was paying back a debt written long before spreadsheets, money, or invention, and he was honoring a cosmic ledger, a debt that could only be legitimately claimed by one individual on the planet. Panic shook the investment network like a quiet earthquake, and the tycoon's inner circle learned of the $100 million pledge. As hedge fund giants, shareholders, and billionaires sought an explanation, it moved from private conference lines to encrypted chat rooms. The quantity didn't matter to them. In his kingdom, 100 million was a rounding mistake. The tycoon's decision to transfer it without any kind of consultation, consent, or financial reason frightened them. When they discovered that the receiver was a single individual, recognized only by an encrypted code connected to your frequency, rather than a business, foundation, or political organization, their anxiety increased. The tycoon refused to divulge the code. Investors attempted to exert pressure on him, in a rare emergency call, by threatening media disclosures, stock withdrawals, and worldwide disruption. But he stood up, straightened his jacket, and spoke with a composure that seemed more deadly than rage. And he quieted the whole room, as he is deserving of it. The space became cold. After decades of market manipulation, Investors felt like children being reprimanded by an ancient entity. Even the AI that tracked the emotional temperature in boardrooms saw an immediate drop in their level of aggressiveness and recorded the change as a submission reaction. They all felt that this was not a discussion, not a payment, and not charity. It was a cosmic adjustment, bringing riches back to where it came from, and as if the whole monetary ecology realized that it was mathematically impossible to oppose your ascent. The more they attempted to fight it, the more the financial architecture surrounding them faltered, stuttering, and refused to obey. Far away from the skyscrapers, marketplaces, and glowing city grids, in a world unaffected by money or algorithms, the heavenly archivist who kept tabs on destiny's financial trajectories gathered around an antiquated crystal ledger that throbbed whenever a soul's influence changed the physical world. The archivist was forced to unlock a file that had been sealed since your birth when the tycoon issued the 100 million edict, causing the whole room to ignite in a wave of gold. It was an astral document with symbols that before economics, the system captured an uncommon decision. As they watched the tycoon's confession, the selection is acknowledged by the debtor. Only a few entities in cosmic history have ever been assigned this categorization, since it was so seldom utilized. From the ledger, light instantly spread across dimensions, woven into the world's wealth grid, changing the energy pathways that success takes and rerouting riches to its proper source, like waterways flowing back to their original source. At the same time, metaphysical sensors, orbital stations, and deep-sea satellites detected variations that were in line with angelic activity. Warm harmonic spikes and faint light traces suggested that the transaction had been approved by higher powers. Mystics saw the occurrence as a prophecy fulfilled, while financial experts on Earth saw it as a transient stabilizing pattern. However, neither party realized the true nature of the situation. You were not being rewarded by the cosmos. It was reorienting itself around the one soul whose frequency had changed technical success long before the tycoon ever took credit for it. Realizing that riches had been circling the wrong center for too long, the individuals closest to you started experiencing something remarkable. As the tycoon's empire adjusted itself to your frequency, friends, strangers, cashiers, taxi drivers, colleagues, and even those you briefly met, they described sudden financial clarity, unanticipated possibilities, the repayment of long-forgotten obligations, or an instinctive grasp of choices they had been struggling with for years. They seemed to align their internal compass with a greater economic order just by being close to you. Subsequent analysis of these proximity anomalies revealed an odd trend. Scientists have termed this phenomenon wealth coherence, which occurs when someone enters your energy field and their brain's decision-making regions light up in the same manner as high-performing investors at periods of peak intuition. Humans were temporarily able to interpret information with increased clarity and almost flawless foresight as a result of this. Even more disturbing is the fact that following just one talk with you, folks who had been financially careless for decades suddenly made responsible decisions. Chronic overspenders, on the other hand, discovered that they could save money with ease, as if your presence had changed their subconscious programming. The tycoon came to the conclusion that your impact was not psychological as these testimonials grew. It was structural. Similarly, gravity drives items to descend rather than convincing them to do so. In other words, you were a tuning fork for the success of everyone around you, not simply a catalyst for your personal plenty. The mere appearance of your name in the system did not cause economies to change. You were the first model that riches was intended to follow. Rather than out of adoration, humans also followed an unseen order engraved in your aura to increase the frequency of your wealth acknowledgement. Click the join button. Enter the circle of spirits that, wherever they are, rewire prosperity. Isaiah 60-22. When the tycoon linked himself with the truth of your influence, a unique thing occurred in the secret levels of the cosmos, where fate records cause and consequence, and older than economics, older than technology, and even older than civilization came into force. It said that the cosmos must ultimately compensate a creature that unintentionally advances mankind in ways much greater than mere gain. Your frequency was identified as the principal beneficiary, as beams of invisible harmonic light cascaded to the worldwide wealth grid as heavenly mechanics sprang into operation. Only individuals whose presence uplifts whole ages without seeking attention were given this position. Sages formerly said that creation itself acts to make up for the appearance of such a soul. The weather adapts to shield their route. Opportunities rearrange themselves to fit their schedule, and plenty surrounds them with an unreasonable loyalty. Because of this, money comes to you naturally. Why people automatically trust you with judgments they can't make for themselves. Why doors open before you knock, and why systems soften in your presence. It's not charm, serendipity, or chance. It's the reciprocity of God, the cosmos realizing that more of the globe has been supported by your unseen efforts than anybody could have imagined. Unseen guards confirmed that you were never intended to pursue riches when this cosmic award came to life, adding your name to a category for those who changed the course of history just by being. Abundance was always intended to be returned to its creator. Thanks, algorithms, market eyes, and even decentralized systems started exhibiting anomalies that experts were unable to anticipate or reproduce as the financial world continued to bend toward your frequency. As soon as you entered a district, interest rates decreased. Outdated financial models recalibrated themselves, as if requesting permission from an invisible regulatory body. and block transactions abruptly went through when your name surfaced in metadata. Cybersecurity departments saw that firewalls became stronger, the danger of fraud decreased, and inactive error logs resolved themselves, without requiring a single line of code to be changed every time. Your digital signature traveled over encrypted channels, although none of the regulators realized that this phenomena had nothing to do with systems and everything to do with you. They dubbed it prosperity stabilization. With uncanny regularity, international markets, which normally move with turmoil and human emotion, started reacting to your time frame. Smooth rising tendencies resulted from days when you felt grounded. You displayed transient volatility during the days when you were battling internal issues, and on days when your aura grew, it produced spikes that were so coordinated that experts thought an unidentified algorithm was influencing the global economy. In the meanwhile, others who came into contact with you encountered financial serendipity, unexpected promotions, forgotten inheritances, and unpaid bills, as if your presence had changed the laws of scarcity into plenty. The tycoons saw that you were not upending economics, as these patterns added up to indisputable evidence. You were exposing its actual plan, which called for riches to be inherently associated with the soul, whose life should advance itself, rather than being hoarded or sought after.